According to the book of Genesis, the first humanity angered the God Yahweh so much that he had a violent rainfall on earth for 40 days and 40 nights, destroying most living beings on the planet. Only a sage known as Noah, together with his family and a selection of animals, survived and were tasked with repopulating the world. The Bible says Noah lived for 350 years after building the ark, but there are no other mentions of his activities. What did he do during all those years? How did humanity survive? Where is the original ark? And who helped the early humans rebuild civilization? We will answer all these important questions in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. When Alexander the Great reached the Indus River, and thus the farthest point of his military expedition, he met several holy Indian men. They told him fantastic stories, including one about an enormous boat that had come from the west in ancient times and had since then turned to stone. He wanted to see it for himself, so on the way back, his expedition stopped by a small island in the Arabian Sea, in modern-day Pakistan. This island is now connected to the continent named Ormara, in honor of one of Alexander's generals, Ormazd, who died nearby. There, lying not far from the coast, he found an enormous vessel, slightly tilted to one side and made entirely out of stone. It was the famous ark built by Noah to save humanity and animals from the legendary Great Flood. It is still visible on Google Earth. But how did it end up in the Arabian Sea, more than 3,000 kilometers or 2,000 miles from where the Bible said it ran aground, at the top of Mount Ararat? The surprising answer has to do with what happened immediately after the flood, and with what Noah did for the rest of his life. The key to understanding exactly what happened after the Great Flood is to know that the biblical Noah went by many names, including in the same Bible. In the classical Greek tradition, Noah was identified as Dionysus the Younger. In the Zoroastrian book of Zend-Avesta, he is called Yima, and the Kabbalistic tradition explains that Noah was the secret identity of a sage called Melchizedek. But these were not all the names he received in his long life of almost 1,000 years. In Sumer, for instance, he was known as King Ziusudra. Ziusudra is the same figure that the Babylonians call Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood in the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh. In Sumerian literature, Ziusudra was warned by the main god Enki to build an ark so that he and his family might be saved from the Great Flood. The Sumerian story of the flood is different from the Egyptian and the Hebrew stories, because in this case, the flood was the consequence of a natural event, and not the direct doing of the gods. Writer Zecharia Sitchin has demonstrated that every 3,600 years, a planet called Nibiru comes close to Earth, and its gravity pull has catastrophic consequences. In his book, The End of Days, Sitchin calculated that due to its highly elliptical orbit, Nibiru caused the Great Flood 6,000 years ago, and then passed close to Earth in 556 BCE. The next time we will be able to see Nibiru and feel its consequences will be in the year 3000. Nibiru was not just another planet, it was the home of the Anunnaki, a group of ancient astronauts that came to Earth and were worshipped as gods by various cultures. What is important here is that when Nibiru passed near the Earth, every human would die. Enki, one of the Anunnaki worshipped on Earth as the god of water and wisdom, warned King Ziusudra about the upcoming flood, so that he could have enough time to build an ark in the mountains. When Nibiru approached, the flood that catastrophically swept over the Earth wiped out most of the human settlements. After 6 days and nights, the storms receded, yet most of the land had disappeared. Finally, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, as the Bible repeats. Interestingly, the Babylonian account stated that the Great Flood was not merely the result of heavy rains, but also colossal winds that increased in intensity, thereby destroying buildings and rupturing dikes. These are the kinds of events we might expect from a large planetary body passing by Earth, or a large celestial object striking Earth, such as a giant asteroid. The story known as the Epic of Gilgamesh states that Enki instructed Ziusudra, "Tear down this house, build a ship. Give up possessions, seek thou life. Despise property, and keep the soul alive. Aboard the ship, take thou the seed of all living things." Some people believe that Enki did this not because he loved humanity, but because he saw this catastrophe as an opportunity to improve the genetic composition of the humans and animals on Earth. That is why he asked to bring the seed of all living things. The Ark of Ziusudra became a sort of gene bank of the ancient world, ensuring that only the best individuals of each species survived. In the Hebrew Bible, the same story is told. This time, Enki is called Yahweh, and Ziusudra is called Noah. When Noah was alone, Yahweh manifested himself and told him, "Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground." Every living thing on the planet perished, except for those who were aboard the ark and the fish in the sea. It is said that even when the rain stopped after 40 days, the waters took 150 more days to drain out. Still, the land was wet and unstable, and Noah sent out a raven and a dove to make sure it was safe to descend. After 3 unsuccessful trips, the dove came back with an olive branch in its beak, so Noah's family and all the animals could finally safely populate the earth again. Before all the living creatures left the ark, Yahweh spoke with a warning. He said to both men and animals, "Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful and multiply, teem on the earth, and multiply in it." This meant that he was not afraid of sending a second catastrophe if humans did not behave correctly. And so, Noah's sons began repopulating the world. The descendants of Sem or Semites became the Jews and Arabs of today. Cam before the ancestor of all African peoples, and Japheth spawned all Indo-European peoples. But why were ancient gods so worried about blood, seeds, and souls? In his classical book, Chariots of the Gods, Eric von Daniken has a very interesting interpretation of the biblical Genesis. He recalls that before Noah knew about the flood, his grandfather Methuselah was forewarned of this tragical event by Enoch, who soon afterward was seen ascending to the skies in a fiery heavenly chariot of spacecraft. Von Daniken says, "Does this not seriously pose the question whether the human race is not an act of deliberate breeding by unknown beings from outer space? Otherwise, what can be the sense of the constantly recurring fertilization of human beings by giants and sons of heaven, with the consequent extermination of unsuccessful specimens? Seen in this light, the flood becomes a preconceived project by unknown beings with the intention of exterminating the human race except for a few noble exceptions. But if the flood, the course of which is historically proved, was quite deliberately planned and prepared, and that several hundred years before Noah received orders to build the ark, then it can no longer be accepted as a divine judgment. One of the goals of the Anunnaki was to breed a slave race to perform manual labor. To that end, the Anunnaki infused their DNA and genetic material and effectively improved the human race by giving them many physiological features, strengths, and abilities not previously occurring in then existing people. According to von Däniken, aliens have been interbreeding with humans for a long time, but their first experiment went terribly wrong, and the results were bad. So the Anunnaki decided to kill most of humanity and start over again. But this time, they would not take chances. How did this new and improved human race thrive and conquer the new world? Climbing out of the ark was only the first step. The Bible says that when the waters receded, the ark ran aground in the mountains of Ararat, which are considered sacred by the Armenians. Several archaeological expeditions have attempted to find the ark in the area, but all failed because it wasn't left behind after the Great Flood. Noah continued to use it later to travel to India. It is thought that this happened several years after the flood, and in the first times he established himself with his wife and sons in the vicinity of modern-day Yerevan, where the waters of the flood left fertile soil that was ideal for agriculture. By that time, most of humanity had perished, and Noah's family were the only people alive in the world. They couldn't hunt animals for fear of extinguishing them. How could they rebuild civilization? And more importantly, who helped them? The answer to these questions is hidden in plain sight in the pages of one of the most read books in history. According to the biblical book of Genesis, chapter 9, as soon as Noah stepped onto dry land, he turned to agriculture, becoming a man of the soil. The first thing he planted was a vineyard, with which he made wine and afterward drank it. One day, his son Ham found him completely drunk and naked, lying on the floor of his tent. He called his brothers Shem and Japheth, who immediately proceeded to cover their father, but avoided looking at him directly. It is then said that when Noah woke up, he cursed Ham and his offspring for laying eyes on his naked body, and decreed that his family would always be a servant to his brothers' families. This story begins to make more sense when we look at other traditions and learn that every story highlights the fact that after the flood, it was Noah who taught every living person how to cultivate the land. As Yima, it is said in the Zend Avesta that he taught people how to build a fenced settlement and keep cattle, men, and dogs inside, and to always have a blazing fire. According to this ancient text, Yima instructed people to drain off water, put up boundary posts, then make houses from posts, clay walls, matting, and fences, and to expand the earth by tilling it. In Kabbalistic tradition, the secret identity of Melchizedek was Noah, a great leader who had come from Atlantis to teach humankind agriculture, the cultivation of corn, and the vine. It is also hinted that he never really died, but moved to another dimension. In the Kabbalah, Melchizedek is the spiritual teacher of Abraham, and one of the wisest men to ever live. The Sumerian tradition explains that with floodwaters receding on Earth, and the planet of Nibiru moving out of our solar system, the Anunnaki and a handful of surviving humans started to reconstruct the world. Enki, the Sumerian Noah, was known as both a scientist and an engineer. He could have easily helped humanity by building dams and waterworks, but he did not want mankind to become spoiled, as the Adamu had been before the flood. He taught them engineering, and oversaw the works to drain the marshes on the northern shore of the Persian Gulf, near the mouth of the Euphrates and the Tigris. Dikes were constructed under his supervision, irrigation systems were dug, and canals connected both rivers, facilitating agriculture. The new humanity was more like the Anunnaki than the previous human civilization. Fauna and flora were brought directly from planet Nibiru, and given to the Earthlings as domesticated animals and plants to harvest. In the new Sumerian schools, knowledge of botany, zoology, geography, mathematics, and theology was imparted. The Anunnaki also taught astronomy, science, architecture, metallurgy, agriculture, and much more. Regarding that, the British author Mark Booth has an interesting explanation. The curious story in Genesis of Noah's sons uncovering his genitals while he was drunkenly sleeping also refers to the petering out of this process. We saw that the genitals were the last part of human anatomy to evolve into their present form, and his sons were curious to find out about their origins. Were they sons of a human or a demigod, a man or an angel? In the Greek world, it is common to find statues with their genitals covered by a vine leaf, the same plant Noah planted after the flood. Furthermore, the Greek god of wine was Dionysus, and Dionysus was one of the many names of Noah. Other Anunnaki entities came to Earth after the flood and helped found kingdoms in the valley of the Tigris and the Euphrates. One Anunnaki king became known as Sargon I of Akkad, and others reigned over Assyria and Babylonia. These alien monarchs were worshipped almost as the representatives of gods on Earth. They gave humans the law codes and made social reforms. Eventually, when humanity was advanced enough to govern itself, the Anunnaki stepped down and let humans rule, not before breeding with them, thus improving the genetic traits of humankind. Although no one has managed to do it yet, some believe that because the Sumerian language is thought to be a simplified version of the Anunnaki language, a sufficiently intelligent scholar could theoretically reconstruct the Anunnaki language. The original Anunnaki mission headquarters at the Sumerian city of Nippur was destroyed during the Great Flood. It was decided that a new control center would be built at Mount Moriah, which meant in Sumerian and possibly in Anunnaki language, Mount of Directing. Mount Moriah became such a holy place that the Temple of Solomon was constructed at its peak, 2,500 years later. The city of Jerusalem was founded between Mount Moriah and Mount Zion. This is the spiritual center of all major Western religions and one of the most sacred places on Earth. The Homo sapiens, a creation of the Anunnaki through careful gene manipulation and interbreeding, multiplied greatly. Each generation of hybrids was stronger than the previous one. In time, human settlements quickly expanded to all the continents on Earth and became the dominant species on the planet again. By this time, the daughters of man were so civilized, beautiful, and sophisticated that the descendants of Anunnaki pursued them. This resulted in children born with extra intelligence, physical strength, and extraordinary abilities. But this also meant that there were now two classes of humans. Those who had both human and Anunnaki parents were the dominant class. But those who were only human were of a lower class and were sent to the gold mines to work. A very short time after the flood, the Anunnaki began to be worshipped as gods, and their descendants that were part Anunnaki, part human, were destined to be kings among men, intermediaries between the Anunnaki and the rest of humankind. Pure humans tended to work, either in agriculture, mining, or trading between other communities. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the firstborn son of Enki, named Marduk, gained sovereignty shortly after the flood receded, and Egyptians welcomed him as Ra, their sun god. But Enlil, the brother of Enki, feared Marduk's power, and so he persuaded his father Anu, the leader of the Anunnaki who lived in Nibiru, to use 7 mighty weapons against Marduk. The war between Marduk and Enlil was so destructive that Zecharia Sitchin called it the end of days. The nuclear weapons had been brought directly from Nibiru and hidden in a cave to protect them during the flood, and also to prevent humans from finding them. When the Council of the Anunnaki approved their use against Marduk, some of the explosions were seen from thousands of miles away. For instance, the ancient Indian text known as the Mahabharata surely took influence from the Anunnaki War when it described how war broke out between the early masters of Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and Kot Diji. According to the text, flying machines called vimanas, whose description is exactly the same as the Anunnaki flying craft, launched a weapon that seemed to be enormously devastating. Ancient Hindu texts describe what they called vimana as flying palaces or heavenly chariots. In Indian art, they are depicted as golden, shiny, round vessels levitating over the ground. Interestingly, one of Anunnaki's main objectives here on Earth was to mine enough gold to repair the atmosphere of Nibiru, and the same material was used as an outside cover for their spacecraft. Like the Egyptians and the Sumerians, Hindu people called the aliens traveling in the Vimana gods. It is at this point that the story of the Ark becomes clearer. It is said that after the flood, Dionysus the Younger, often depicted in a boat, traveled from Atlantis via Europe to India to teach the whole world the arts of agriculture, the sowing of crops, the cultivation of wine, and writing. Writing had already been taught by Enoch, but was now in danger of being lost in the devastation brought by the flood. The Greek epic poet Nonnus described Dionysus' migration to India, and the same journey is also described in the Zendavestra as the March of Rama on India, which is the origin of the great Indian epic, the Ramayana. Dionysus, or Noah, did not move into uninhabited territories, but went to various places of the world, teaching the peoples how to cultivate the land and to develop civilizations. One story that repeats itself many times is that of Dionysus forbidding cannibalism and human sacrifice wherever he went. Native priests in India would sometimes keep enormous snakes, which were worshipped as gods and fed the flesh of captives. The Ramayana describes how Rama and his followers suddenly invaded these temples with torches, driving out both priests and snakes. He would appear without warning among enemies, sometimes with mighty projectile weapons that the texts describe as bow and arrow, and sometimes petrifying his enemies with his pale, lotus-blue gaze. In the Ramayana, Rama is described as dispossessed, a nomad whose kingdom lay beneath the seas. This explains what Noah did during his 350 years on Earth after the flood. He roamed the world, taking many different names and teaching the people, who were his descendants, agriculture, as well as how to achieve a high degree of civilization. Afterward, according to different accounts, he either ascended to his home planet on a Vimana or descended to the depths of the sea, where the ancient civilization of Atlantis lay. According to the Indian texts, in either case, he had to leave the ark behind, which turned to stone over thousands of years near the mouth of the Indus River. But perhaps his most enduring work is found closer to the original place where he had built the ark in ancient Egypt. The biblical tale of the top of a mountain being the first thing to emerge from the waters after the flood is eerily similar to the Egyptian tale of the beginning of the world. In fact, there are two Egyptian myths about the creation of the world, a fact that puzzled Egyptologists who did not understand why they had created two different tales. Now we know that this is because there were two times when creation happened, once at the beginning of time and later after the destruction caused by the flood. In the first myth, before the creation of the world, there was nothing, only an endless void. Ptah, the god of craftsmen and sculptors, created himself and then the rest of the world by uttering secret words only known to him. This original world collapsed during the flood and was replaced by an endless sea known only as Nun. The second story of the creation states that at this time there was only one god, Atum. He made a mound emerge from the primeval waters of Nun, and this original mound of earth was the source of everything in the world. Standing upon that hill, like Noah on Mount Ararat, according to the Bible, Atum created the god of air, Shu, and the goddess of moisture, Tefnut. The ancient texts tell different stories about how Atum created the first gods. In the pyramid texts, it's described as sneezing and spitting to make Shu and Tefnut. But in later texts, it's said that he created them through masturbation. Moreover, it's clarified that the hand Atum used represented the female principle within him. This underscores the significance of genitals in the post-flood era and sheds light on why Noah reacted angrily when his son saw his genitalia. Shu and Tefnut were the first godly couple in ancient Egypt, and they joined together to give birth to another couple of gods. These were Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. Together, they formed the borders of the world, marking exactly where it starts and where it ends. Geb and Nut had 4 children: Osiris, the god of fertility and rebirth; Set, the god of chaos and the forces of uncertainty; Isis, the god of motherhood; and Nephthys, which was a female version of Set. The ancient Egyptians called the time immediately after the flood Zep-Tepi, literally meaning the first time. Not because it was the first time it happened, but because it was the time when they started counting the days, and every day was considered to be a recreation of the Zep-Tepi. This time is also used for astronomical observations, which in ancient Egyptian times were incredibly accurate. Hundreds of years later, the pyramids were built following these observations, and they were made to resemble the primeval mound of Zep-Tepi. Every year in Egyptian history began with a festival called Wepet Renpet, meaning literally the opening of the year, which recalled the Zep-Tepi and coincided with the flood of the Nile, which was of course linked to fertility and the possibility of growing crops in Egypt. As we have seen, the god of agriculture was Osiris, one of the gods in the 3rd generation since Zep-Tepi, and the first pharaoh of Egypt according to Plutarch. Osiris is an interesting divinity, and one of his first distinctive characteristics was that he was always depicted as having green skin, which has been mistakenly interpreted as a sign that he was of alien origin. Actually, the color of his skin is a symbol of fertility, as he was the one who taught agriculture to the ancient Egyptians. Some people identify Osiris either as Noah's son, Ham, or Ham's son. In any case, he continued civilizing enterprise that Noah started in the whole world and laid the groundwork for one of the most powerful and important civilizations in human history. Royal Egyptian lists, such as the Palermo stone, often mention that Osiris and his wife Isis ruled Egypt for more than 400 years, after which they ascended from earth. After an initial period in which the so-called gods ruled the country, they finally considered humanity worthy of self-governing, and thus left the planet and turned the power to the pharaohs, who ruled Egypt for thousands of years afterward. In a remarkable turn of history, the one who conquered Egypt and ended the rule of the pharaohs was Alexander the Great in the year 332 BCE, shortly before coming across the original vessel used to sail the waters during the Great Flood. The Great Flood was a catastrophic event known to every ancient civilization. Each of them has a particular explanation as to why it happened, how they managed to stay alive during the violent storms and rains, and how they were able to rebuild civilization afterward. But despite the differences, there are a few things that are already clear. Higher beings, the Anunnaki, tried to genetically improve our human DNA so that we could be more useful to them in their search for gold. They were dissatisfied with how the first generations of human, the Adamu, turned out, so they killed almost all of them. Humankind could get back on its feet only thanks to the unwavering help of Noah, who traveled the world with different names: Yima, Dionysus, Zisudra, and Melchizedek. Thanks to his efforts, he gave humanity the gifts of agriculture and wisdom. And the best thing we can do with that wisdom is to keep our ears and hearts open to the truths of the universe. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again.